When Greek historian Herodotus visited Egypt for the first time, he was astounded to see how things were different in their society than any other civilization, empire, or country he had been to before, accusing them of reversing the ordinary practices of mankind, such as marriage, lovemaking, and public display of affection. Herodotus' experience of Egypt was nothing less than an eye-opener. Welcome to Nutty History. Today, let's find out what love and marriage were like in ancient Egypt, and why Herodotus found them shocking. Marriage in ancient Egypt was pretty much mostly arranged and monogamous, but of course the pharaohs were an exception to this rule. Despite that, the marriage institution was aimed pretty much towards social goals rather than individual fulfillment, such as communal stability and generational advancement. But history has also taught us that marriage meant a lot more than that to the ancient Egyptians. There is evidence indicating that romantic love and affable companionship were equally important for ancient Egyptians in their married life. The New Kingdom offers us a lot of art, poetry, and other forms of works praising the virtues of one's lover or wife. Tutankhamun, the pharaoh who is known for his intact tomb more than any of his reign's accomplishments, had beautiful images of him with his wife, Ankhesenamun, in romantic poses. Interestingly, every painting of Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun depicts their devotion to each other by their proximity, hand gestures, and adorable expressions. Such art covers most of the concerned pharaoh's tomb, who died at the mere young age of 18. Sadly, Ankhesenamun disappears from historical records shortly after, possibly implying her early demise as well. This was a common theme in tomb paintings, as more art and inscriptions showed husbands and wives eating and dancing and working together. Ancient Egyptian society was based on the idea of the nuclear family, and they would arrange their gods into such groupings as well. Once a young man was well into adolescence, it was appropriate for him to seek a partner and begin his own family. Females were probably thought to be ready for marriage after their first menses. The marrying age of males was perhaps a little older. The perfect age to become a groom in ancient Egypt was generally 16 to 20 years of age, as they would have a job and be able to support a family. Interestingly, there was no wedding ceremony in ancient Egypt. A woman was considered married to a man the moment she entered his house after agreeing upon the goods. Like any other contemporary civilization, marriages were usually arranged by one's parents with an agreed-upon bride price and reciprocal gifts from the groom's family to the bride's family. However, this was not a dowry. In ancient Egyptian terms for marriage, mini meant to moor a boat and find a house. The groom often gave the bride's family a gift, and he also gave his wife presents. Prenuptial agreements were common, and whatever material possessions the bride brought to the marriage remained hers to do with as she pleased. The purpose of marriage was to have children, but the couples were expected to love and honor each other and be always grateful for their presence in their own life. Taking a wife was synonymous with setting up a house. A man was expected to love his wife, and was pretty much bound to do so by religion. Women were treated at almost equal status with men in ancient Egypt, as it was believed that after the dawn of creation, the goddess Iset made the genders equal in power. Yet even by a small margin, males were considered the dominant gender. Women were traditionally in charge of the home, and ideally, the new couple moved into their own house shortly after the marriage. According to the legal text, each spouse retained control of the property that they brought into the marriage, and whatever was acquired during the union was considered under joint ownership. Unlike Rome or Greece, marriage was entirely a non-religious affair in ancient Egypt. Neither the state nor religious doctrines cared who you were married to, and apart from contracts made for financial matters of the marriage, marriages were not even registered anywhere. These financial contracts, or marriage settlements, were drawn by the fathers of the groom and the bride and signed by them before witnesses. This was perhaps the only formality that could be considered as an Egyptian wedding ceremony. Even though ancient Egyptian royal family members were expected to marry their siblings, the practice of in-family marriage was generally discouraged among the noble and common population. For most people, the marriage was arranged for the maximum benefit of both parties, and it was hoped that as they lived together, they would grow to love one another if they did not already. Egyptians were tremendously proud of their heritage, and ancestry was traced through both mothers' and fathers' lines. Despite living separately, respect for parents and elders and the family was a cornerstone of morality. The most fundamental duty of the eldest son or daughter was to care for his parents in their last days and to ensure that they received a proper burial. As we mentioned, procreation was an important aspect of ancient Egyptian religion. Also, Egyptians were not shy about openly discussing the act of lovemaking, another thing that made Herodotus uncomfortable. Unlike most modern religions that try to convince you that babies are delivered by storks, ancient Egyptian was fairly progressive. Moreover, honey and crocodile dung were the best options for contraceptives in their time, so clearly it was a no-brainer why ancient Egyptian women would get pregnant very early in their married life. Children of both sexes were valued and wanted in households of all classes of ancient Egypt. There is also no indication that female infanticide was practiced, and that also solidifies ancient Egypt's attitude towards gender equality. However, they did come up with methods to determine the gender of the child during pregnancy, along with tests for fertility and pregnancy itself. We already explained how married women used to pass water on crop seeds in the fields to determine pregnancy in our Creepy Things That Were Normal in Ancient Egypt video. But there was another layer to it. The expectant mother was supposed to water 2 crops, barley and emmer wheat. If the barley sprouted first, the woman was pregnant with a male child. If the emmer wheat was germinated, she was pregnant with a female child. If the urine had no effect, the woman was not pregnant. Though there was actually some scientific basis for this test, as a pregnant woman produces a variety of hormones, some of which can induce early flowering in particular plants, there is no known relationship between these plants and the determination of gender. The birth of a child was a time of great joy as well as one of serious concern, given the high rate of infant mortality and the stress of childbirth on the mother was highly fatal. Childbirth was viewed as a natural phenomenon and not an illness, so assistance in childbirth was usually carried out by a midwife. Egyptian children who successfully completed their 5th year could generally look forward to a full life. Based on the skeletal evidence, that would be about 33 years for men and 29 years for women in peasant society. However, life expectancy in the upper middle class was expected to be 60 to 70 years, just like modern times. Kids were given plenty of time to play, but past infancy they were also expected to train for adulthood. Every male child was expected to learn their father's trade and become professional at it. Every girl, except those of royal blood, was trained to learn how to manage a household, kitchen, care for the young, elderly, and pets. While most traditional religions and civilizations make a lot of fuss about virginity, ancient Egypt had no care for premarital intercourse. In fact, there is no word for virgin in the ancient Egyptian language, suggesting that one's degree of intercourse, or lack of, was not thought a matter of consequence. However, they did not look kindly upon fooling around after marriage. Couples were expected to be faithful to each other and practice monogamy. Sensuality was important for ancient Egyptians, and even ancient Egyptian religion revolved around ideas of fertility and procreation. Unmarried women were free to have intercourse with whomever they chose, as premarital intercourse was widely accepted. The Ebers Medical Papyrus, which was written in the 15th century BC, lists the contraceptives that were popular in ancient Egypt. Surprisingly, soliciting intercourse was hardly a thing, and there is next to no evidence of it during the Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdom. Though brothels have been identified in ancient Egypt, and soliciting intercourse is not mentioned in any written works or legal decisions. As the Egyptians valued social harmony, it makes sense that they would place special emphasis on stories encouraging domestic tranquility. Many poems talk about the act of lovemaking among lovers and spouses, and all are focused on how blissful they feel in the company of their partners. Your hand is in my hand. My body trembles with joy. My heart is exalted because we walk together. I was taken as a wife to the house of Neferkapta that night, and the pharaoh sent me a present of silver and gold. He, her husband, slept with me that night and found me pleasing. He slept with me again, and we loved each other. She is more beautiful than any other girl. She is like a star rising, with beautiful eyes for looking, and sweet lips for kissing. Even though Egyptians were expected to have true affection for their life partners, that doesn't mean Egyptians were forced to commit to a marriage. If there was trouble in paradise, paradise was not meant to become a prison. In ancient Egypt, marriages were expected to last a lifetime and would continue to be a commitment in the afterlife as well. As the majority of the male population lived until their 30s, and it wasn't uncommon for women to succumb during childbirth around the age of 16 or so, the idea of them reunited in the afterlife was a consoling one. However, just like any other period, not all matches were made so divine and ended up not loving each other anymore. The end of a marriage was as simple as the beginning. one or both spouses asked for a divorce, and material possessions were divided according to the prenuptial agreement. A new agreement was signed, and the marriage was over. The children of the marriage belonged to the mother, and in the case of divorce, the mother would have custody. Even though warnings of the unfaithful woman were plentiful in literature, socially women were given enormous freedom in marriage. Anything she had entered the marriage with, she was allowed to take with her when it ended. Only a charge of infidelity, amply proven, deprived a woman of her rights in divorce. But laws got complicated during the New Kingdom period, and so did the marriage agreements. In the case of divorce, the dowry provided by the groom at the time of marriage reverted to the wife for her support, or a single payment was given to her. Alimony payments were also an option, with the husband sending his ex-wife a monthly stipend until she remarried, even if there were no children involved. Tell us in the comments if you are surprised to find ancient Egyptian society as modernistic and open-minded as we are. Also, do tell us which other civilization or period shall we cover in this series. And, as always, thanks for watching Nutty History.